Okay, so I'm going to be testing sound. So we don't have the same problem we had last time, and then I will put it so you can just ignore. We had last time, and then I will put it so you can just ignore. Alright, see you in 15 minutes. Alright, see you in 15 minutes. Sorry about that. That was just a check because the camera didn't work last time, and I'm hoping it works this time. everybody, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. I am hoping that you are seeing, nope, you are on the wrong one. Hold on, I'll get you there. There we go. Hi, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name is Maria Spatelnik and I'm here to help you make more quilts in less time with less stress. Stress, what a wonderful word. It's been a weird couple of weeks. So my stress levels are a little bit higher than usual. I apologize for that. I have not stepped foot in here except for Monday night when one of my quilting groups has a bee. I did get to spend about an hour up here sorting out pieces for the wedding quilt, but I haven't done any sewing in here for a while. So I am hoping to put together a sewing day so that I can just sit here and crank out those houses we've talked about. And if I do that, I will invite you in to join me by running another live stream. So anyway, if this is your first time here, welcome. And you'll find that this is a little bit different. This is not a strict tutorial type of class or anything like that. It's kind of a sit and chat. I have found over time that I just like sharing with my friends, so welcome friends, and we're going to be talking a little bit. Hopefully you will get on the chat, and in fact I'm trying to pull that up now because my computer's being weird as usual. So I am trying to get where I can see the chat because it's telling me that I'm live. There we go, wrong bar. Okay, here we go. So now I can see the chat. Hi Jody. And you're welcome to chime in at any time. I am a professional organizer by trade, and that is what has been kicking my little behind lately. I have several hoarding clients. Hoarding, if you don't know what that is a condition where people accumulate vast quantities of things. And so in the last 2 weeks, I have taken 2 cargo van and 2 15-foot box trucks worth of stuff out of one house, and all I've managed to clear is the garage. There's a little bit less in the house because we widened the pathway, but we've taken a hallway and we have a path this big. So it has been a huge job. I've had lots of people working with me, but even so, that's all we've been able to accomplish after many, many hours of work. The nice thing is that most of the stuff in this particular house is in new condition, still in the boxes, still with tags, etc. So I can box it all up and take it to an estate sale company who is going to start selling them. So they're going to get some of their money back at least, as opposed to if it was like another house we're doing where it's all old food, like not even donatable, then it's just the cost. So it's kind of nice that this person is going to get a lot of money back, but a lot is a relative term because compared to what they spent, no. But compared to having to pay to haul it away, yes. So it's kind of a weird situation. But I have been working my little behind off, and so I haven't been up here. However, while we were waiting, you probably heard the sewing machine. I have put together a couple of little roofs here. I'll be doing some pressing, and we're going to continue on today with the wedding quilt. I usually start with a tip of the day. This is kind of a weird tip because it's not really a tip. It's more of a philosophy. I have found that a lot of my clients that are in the military move every 2 years. So they go through their things and purge every 2 years. So even if every time they're given a slightly larger weight allotment, they don't tend to go too far over. They tend to bring it all down. And then they retire. And when you're not moving all the time, you're still accumulating at the same rate, but nothing is leaving, they tend to find themselves overburdened with things. I have been talking with many of my clients about the idea that every year you should purge some stuff. Even if not do a whole house purge. Every year you need to consciously go through and get rid of the things that no longer serve you. One of the things we talk about is 15 minutes a day to improve your life. So doing laundry doesn't count, doing your dishes doesn't count, but going through your linen closet and say, is there anything in here we don't use? I no longer have that queen size bed because my son moved out. All of the queen size sheets can go. You can play a game where you take a trash bag around your house and you just walk around finding things you can donate. There's all kinds of different ways to do this on a fairly consistent basis. The advantage is, A, it's a reminder to keep an eye on what you're buying so you're not buying a lot of extras. Excuse me. It's also a great way to reconnect with what you have. A lot of times people forget what they own. So I was in a house the other day, and when I was working with the client, she had one of those great big handy dandy mixer type things, one of the top of the line ones. And as we were going through her kitchen, she found she had another one. She had just spent, I think, $600 for a mixer to copy one she already had because she forgot she had it. It had been so long since she'd pulled it out. So going back through and saying, okay, what do I have? Means I might say, okay, how can I use this more? It's one of those things where understanding where you stand with things and the things in your life makes a big difference, and it can save you a ton of money. I know some people out there are going to say, well, I'm on the buy nothing groups, so I don't spend any money. Well, that's true, and it's not. Every square inch of space in your house costs you money. You've got your mortgage or your rent. You have your utility bills. You have your insurance, etc., etc., etc. So each thing should deserve the space it's given. Now, am I saying keep an accounting book or anything like that? No, I'm not that crazy, okay? But what I'm saying is if you've got things that don't serve you anymore, open up that space for either something that will, or just to have more space in your life. When we quilt, one of the things we talk about is background and negative space gives your eye that chance to relax and to rest while it travels around the quilt. We need that in our homes as well. And if your home is really cluttered, your mind does not get that resting spot that we want our eyes to have in a quilt. So just keep that in mind. It's a little bit of a philosophy more than a tip, but if you did 15 minutes a day, you may never need to do a bulk clean. If you do 15 minutes a day and you don't need all that time because your house is perfect, then you can use the time you don't need for maintenance to do things like reading a topic that you don't have the time to read on a general basis, or learning to paint, or setting aside time to write a letter or make a phone call to someone you haven't spoken to in a long time. There's lots of ways to use that time once there's no longer clutter needs. But a lot of times people have the clutter accumulate, they don't deal with it, and then something catastrophic occurs, and they have to make a million decisions in a very short period of time. The gentleman whose house I was in earlier today fell, got trapped by some of his stuff, had to call in the EMTs to help him out. They took him to the hospital. But the code compliance officer showed up and said, nobody can live here. It's unsafe for human habitation, and he placarded the house. So now, this man, who is so sweet, is going to be spending a lot of money to clean out the house while he's living in New Jersey with his family. He's not allowed to come home. There's a question of, is there any structural damage? There's lots of things going on here because it just never got under control. And as grief and loss triggers hoarding behavior, the more bad things that happen in his world, the more stuff got accumulated. And it gets to a point where you can't find anything anymore. So if you need something, you're going to go and buy new. And so now you have 10 things or 15 things or 100 of things. Just in that front hall that we widened that path and we got one wall down about half of its height, there were 84 pairs of shoes. And all brand new. All brand new shoes. I'm not talking any used shoes. And a lot of them were duplicates. So he bought them and then rebought them, even though he hadn't worn them yet. But everything kept getting buried because he'd look for something and put stuff on top of other things. And then you couldn't find those things. So he would, it's called churning, when you basically turn your space into a washing machine. Now that's not what happens with most of you. It's really not. But the having of too much clutter can still make it hard for you to do what you want to do. A lot of my sewing buddies, they have this mound of fabric on their cutting table because they've auditioned fabrics for quilts, things like that. And then they got so excited about quilting that they ran off and they said, you know what, I'm just going to cut this on the kitchen counter so I can start sewing, because sewing is the fun part. But they didn't put away all the stuff that was over on the cutting table. And so really before they're sewing, they should be going through and putting all of that stuff away so they can use that cutting table. But that's not fun. So it tends to not happen. But if you need fabric that you are pretty sure you auditioned at some point and it might be on the table somewhere, now you got to slog through that whole pile and try to find it. And then are you going to take the time right now to put everything away? Probably not. And so I've got clients with these just mounds of fabric that they churn every time they're looking for something. If they had put the fabric away at the time, it would have taken a lot less time, because now it's all mangled and twisted and, you know, it's gotten incestuous with its friends. If they had just said, no, this isn't going to work, and just put it right away, there'd be less cleaning to do, less sorting to do. It wouldn't take all day to put the fabric away. And life gets a lot easier if you can do it in smaller chunks. So, again, it's the philosophy more so than an actual tip. Okay. My hands are still having a hard time, and I'm working a lot, so it's not healing very fast. So I'm still a little bit limited on what I can do, but I can do the sewing machine for relatively short, for me, periods of time. Those of you who know me know I have no problem setting aside a whole day for sewing. So, you know, an 8 or 10 hour day is not uncommon for me especially when I'm doing charity quilting. But in this case, that's not the way that's going to work. I'll do what I can, but when it starts to hurt, I'm going to have to stop so I don't cause more damage. But I'm also spending a lot of time at clients' houses, so this is going to be a challenge for me to get this quilt done. Now, if you're new here, my son got married in February, and I am doing a temperature quilt for him. Now, a temperature quilt has usually one fabric that's chosen for each 10 degrees of temperature. And then you do one fabric for the high for the day, and then another fabric for the low for the day. And so there's a wide variety there on what those differences can be. But usually it's just like 10 fabrics that are picked. I'm doing them by color group instead, so if I have 2 days that are the same temperature range, I'm not having 2 of the same fabric next to each other. I have 2 of the same color, but not the same fabric or depth of color. So I might have a tint, which means it's a light shade, white's been added to the pure color, or a shade, which is a darker version where black has been added to the color. So I put together this chart, and so I've got the highs and the lows for every day starting at their wedding. And so I'm going to go all the way through till their anniversary. So one advantage to this is I have the dates and I have the temperatures, but if I don't get to it right away, it's fine, because I can't even start really making the quilt till after their anniversary, because I won't have all the temperatures. But whatever I can do earlier is going to all be to the good. So I do have the first 2 houses done. So black and gray excuse me, is the color for under 30 degrees. Okay, so these are my first two houses. They are going to finish at 2 inches, and this number here, the house number, is the date. So today we're going to be sewing some more houses. Now, one thing that I did, and I'm going to start with today, are some roofs. Now, I have an advantage in that I can make a whole bunch of roofs, all different colors, because we know that we're going to have some low temperatures back under 30 again, so black roofs would be good by the time we get to February, right? And so anything up there, probably up until the 80s maybe. I don't want to do very many in the 80s. And yellow, which is 90 to 95, I'm going to save a few of these roof pieces that I have, but I'm not going to make them up until I know where you're going to need them. But these roofs here, I know I'm going to use. When I have a house done, the bottom part of the house, which is the high temperature, I can look here first and see if I've already made a roof that'll work with it. And if I haven't, I can make one and save this for some other time. Our temperatures right now are going up on the bell curve, right? And then they're going to go down again. So any extras that I had that I made at the beginning, I can go ahead and use at the end. And that did happen. Where is it? Right here. I made a house based on this green, right? I was starting to put it together, and I realized I'd made a mistake in my temperatures. Green is a high of 40 to 49, okay? But the day that I was writing down the temperatures, I wrote it down right then, forgetting that I was going to have potentially more temperature that day, which I did, but my low might have been lower than I thought it was, and it was. So now I know I can only go on to the Weather Underground site to get the history, but I cannot put today's date down because the official temperatures may be different by the time I get back to it. So here I have all the pieces cut. I started the sewing, and I realized I couldn't make it that number. So that was... the high that day was 51, so it should have been purple. If I had finished sewing this, it would have been the wrong house. And I'd have put the wrong number in it. I'd have to taken that out and redone it. So I'm glad that I caught it when I did, but that means that this is going to just sit around because there's going to be another day with a high in the 50s. You know, it hasn't been lately. There's been some lately, but a lot of what we've had is 60s and 70s now, so they're different colors. So I do have a couple here that I've done that with. This is another one where it was gray because I thought that the high for the day was 21 and it was actually 32. So we went from gray to brown. And so this one was a bad one. So again, I double check, etc. But that's the thing, is I'll get to use these anyway. So if I go ahead and I put these together, everything except the number column, then when it's time, I can put the number column together and then sew 2 more seams and then the house will be built. And I just plop the roof on and we're finished for that day. So I'm a little bit ahead on some and I'm way behind on others. Okay. I mentioned how I'm tracking all of this, and I did have a couple of people who didn't quite understand. I know I've gone over this before, so those of you who are here all the time, I apologize, but if people are going to watch me do this, it makes sense for them to see what I'm doing. I'm doing everything on index cards, okay? And so, hold on, let me switch cameras here. Hold on, I have transition. I'm learning a new tool here, so, okay. So I have the house number, the door, then the purple here is the high color for the day, and then, again, this is just the main part of the house, so there's no roof. And so I can sew everything that's one of the outside supports of the house because they're all green. See here? So I can sew my main color to a green, and I can sew a lot of those in a row. The advantage to that is that I don't have to keep doing a lot of thread changes because the roofs all have green on the corners. So I can do a whole bunch of sewing at once with the green, and then I can go in for each individual house and change thread colors if I need to. This came up Monday where somebody said, why don't you just use gray and call it good enough? Yes, I could do that. And if you're making bigger houses, it's much more doable because the seam lines and stitches are less noticeable when there's more of them, right? If I'm looking at a seam this long and it's folded over, I'm not going to be noticing as much all those little lines that are made by the thread. But when the piece is tiny, you'll notice them more. Gray still would work. If that's what I decided to do, that would be fine. And especially if I used a really thin thread, then it would hardly show at all. But no, me being me, I'm going to color match a little bit. Of course, I also have hundreds of spools of thread. So, excuse me. So for me, color matching isn't a big deal. And I have a lot in my bobbins too. So even if it's not perfect, if it's closer, it'll make it a little bit harder to see the thread. So by doing a bunch of green at the same time, I have that advantage of just plopping in the green because the background color for the entire quilt is going to be the same green fabric. So I'm not doing, shading to show gullies or anything like that between my houses. Could I? Yes. Have I done crazy stuff like that before? Yes. This is crazy enough. I had originally planned on doing something super simple and then decided on something a little bit more complex, then it got more complex, and I'm stopping here with what I'm doing. It's already crazy enough. So I do have the same green, which is again a nice advantage because if I need to move a house from here to over here because I made a mistake, like I mentioned on that gray house, whenever it's ready, I can just pop in whatever number and put it where it belongs. So that's an advantage. Okay. All right, so let's sew some house roofs. Okay. Oh, a little bit more on this. So this is the body here. This is the main house. And then I have finished roofs, obviously. I have cards with all of the numbers. So if I don't know the temperature yet, it's here. So I could make up a whole bunch of numbers at once without having to think about it. So here's my extra doors. So the doors are 1 by 1.5. I'm going to spin you here. I actually have a drawer on the other side of my room. You can actually see back here. Those are the drawers where I keep my squares and bricks and blocks. These bricks are 1 by 1.5. So I don't have to cut very many doors because I already have a lot of them pre-made, which is kind of a fun thing. But these are ones that I cut before my brain woke up and said, hey, ding dong, you already have some of those. I have, where is it? Okay, I also have this card. So, let me switch cameras again. I keep trying to push the buttons and I should be transitioning. Another thing that I'm going to do, my son is a math guy, okay? So the front is going to be all these houses and roads and that kind of stuff. But on the back, I'm going to have a 1-inch square raw, so it'll finish at a 1/2 inch, of all the different temperature ranges. So when I'm doing a house, I'm cutting an extra 1-inch square. And so I'm going to line them up across so we can see during the course of their first year that there were more days in the 70s than anything else, or whatever it is. Just for the amusement value of having that as another pieced part of my backing. Is it necessary? Of course not. Am I going to put any extra houses that I make that I don't use on the front of the quilt on the back just because? Yes, of course I am. But this I thought would be a little extra fun thing to have to show all the different temperatures that happen in the course of the year. And he'll be able to see what this is. Another thing I'm considering doing is taking the color out of the chart and then doing a print on fabric of the chart with the actual temperatures on the back. Haven't decided that one for sure yet, but that is something that another thing that I'm considering of putting on the back, just as a little extra Easter egg kind of thing that nobody else will see unless they decide to show it. So I thought it'd be fun. Anyway, so those are all just being kept on the card by temperature ranges. So under 30 is gray and black, 30 to 39 is brown, 40 to 49 is green, 50 to 59 is purple, 60 to 61 is blue, 70 to 79 is reds, including pinks, 80 to 89 is orange, and 90 to 99 is yellow, and anything over 100 degrees is going to be white. I hope there's no white on this quilt. I hope there's not a whole lot of yellow either, but the orange and pink are their favorite colors. My son's favorite is orange, and Lauren's favorite is pink. So having that in the highs in the 70s, from 70 to 90, I'm assuming is going to be a large percentage of the quilt. So I'm hoping that it means that more of the quilt will be their favorites. So that's why I'm not in rainbow order. Okay? It's kind of, because I did the cooler colors in the winter, but the exact order is more aligned by having it for the favorites in the top of our bell curve of temperatures. Okay? All right. Have I missed anything? I talked about how I did the houses. I talked about the roofs. I talked about the doors and the backs. Oh, you may have seen this one swing by. This is something completely different. When I get down to the little nubs of quilts, I am tired of having an entire drawer full. It's the same size drawer as this one, right? Of 1-inch squares. Because that means I think there's over 5,000 squares in that drawer. So now what I'm doing is anything that's 1 inch wide or 1.5 inch wide, and at least 1 inch long, is getting cut at however long it is by the 1 inch or the 1.5. And then what I'm doing is, hold on, no, I messed that up again. Okay, I gotta learn this. I'm sorry. So what I'm going to do is sew them end to end so the 1 inches all line up, and then I can use that as inserts in sashing, in a block, or something like that, which would add a whole lot of color, but it'll already be done. And so that's the kind of thing where I can just, whenever I want, sew any two pieces together, and then stack them up, and then when there's enough of them, I'll use them. I can spin them onto a little section of a toilet paper tube and just roll it into my machine whenever I'm ready. So this is something else. If it's less than 1 inch, and I know people are like, what do you mean less than 1 inch? If it's less than 1 inch, it's going here in this bag, which is labeled microchips under 1 inch. Okay? So there's some triangles in there. There's some pieces that look bigger, but they are not 1 inch square. They're missing a corner or something. It has to be a minimum of 1 inch to go onto the strip set one. So otherwise they go into microchips. Those will be turned into chip blocks used in other ways later as well. Someone asked me, what is the smallest size I keep? I have been known to keep pieces as small as 3/4 of an inch. Square-ish, kind of. I use some of the strangest pieces in my quilting. And so what will I do if I have a bunch of these 3/4 inch strips at the end? Well, I will go to my chip area, find some pieces I cut 3/4 of an inch, get some that'll all be the same size, and then I'll do strip blocks with them, or I will do something else with them. They will not go to waste. And you'll probably see me do something with them right here. But that's the kind of thing where there's still enough that can be done by putting enough of them together. So a lot of people don't like, some people call them crumb blocks, I've always called them chip blocks, don't like putting together all those tiny little pieces, or they don't like the fact that it's, I can't say that. You can put together chip blocks that are all the same color, just the various fabrics, so that it's all shades of blue, which looks amazing on a water quilt. So if you're doing something with fish, if you do that as the background, it's all these different shades of blue, amazing. However, some people don't do that. They like to just have the big variety of colors, but it can get overwhelming with so many tiny little pieces. So if you do something like strips, but you do tiny strips, you can make blocks that look like a striped fabric and then incorporate it like you would a striped fabric. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It does take more time, and it does come down to, okay, Maria, I can spend the time to do that, or I can go and buy a striped fabric. It'll cost me more money, but cost me less time, and time is more limited. This is true. You don't have to do that. There's no reason that these little pieces couldn't have been in a dog bed. I could have cut 1-inch strips out of my yardage and not had any pre-cuts whatsoever on the wall behind you. That's just not how I quilt. It doesn't mean you can't. For me, I like using every little inch. People give me baggies of fabric at my quilt guild, and they'll say, is this too small to use? There are no pieces that are too small to use. Because if worse came to worse, and it's like less than 1/2 inch, so it's not worth the seam allowances to me, because I don't do micro quilts. I don't intentionally do like the doll baby quilts that are fancy. Okay, I'm not doing something that's only 1/4 inch pieced as a general rule. Yes, I know some of you know me and you're like, I've seen you do 1/4 inch. Yes, I have. But it's not my norm. If it's too small for me, or if it's basically just threads, I do have a friend who does confetti quilts. And so people give me trash bags full of scraps, and I process them down, and when I'm done with it and I cannot get anything more out of this fabric, I will give that sandwich baggie of confetti to my friend, because that's the quantities that are left when I'm done, because I'm a skinflint. I am. But that's okay. Okay. And you don't have to be that way. I promise you, there is nothing wrong with buying the fabric you love, making the quilts that you love, and saying, good, I'm done, and giving away the rest of your fabric. Please don't throw it away. Somebody can use it, whether it's for dog beds, or whether it's for doing what I'm doing, or whatever. There's a use for that fabric. Let's keep it out of the landfill and put it into something beautiful. So please keep that in mind. Okay, so I've done a lot of talking and not very much sewing. So you can tell I've also been spending a lot of time alone working lately. Okay, so let me set some things aside here, so it's a little less cluttered here on my tabletop. Okay, now let's switch back to camera 3. Alright, and I'm going to grab a drink here, so that's what you're going to hear. Okay, so what I have here are 6 roofs and a bunch of 1-inch green squares that I've cut I've marked the diagonal line. Okay. one reason that I like doing roofs in a situation like this is if my brain is not at its best because I'm really tired, which I am, it doesn't matter because it's kind of a mindless thing. So I've lined this up. I want it to slant from the middle to the outer edge. Okay. Now, a lot of times if I'm doing this type of sewing, let's say I was doing snowball blocks or something that were bigger, I would mark it a 1/2 inch away, then I would cut in between, and so I'd have this little half square triangle already sewn. I made the decision for this quilt I wasn't going to do that. If I did the 1/2 inch, I would wind up with approximately a 1/4 inch half square triangle at best. And that was something where I didn't want that many, even if I want, okay, let me come back here. Even if I had something in mind, I was going to use 1/4 inch half square triangles, those would have to finish at about using an 1/8 inch seam to make an 1/8 inch triangle at the end. That's a lot of fabrics with a lot of green, and this is not a green that I love, so I would be cursing myself for that particular choice. I do have in this drawer unit right here, this one right there, half square triangles that finish at they will finish at a 1/4 inch because they're 3/4 inches now. So I'll still get to have my 1/4 inch seam allowance, but they're going to be tiny little half square triangles. I do have those. I don't want 1/8 inch or 1/16 inch and try to make that work. It's not worth the headache to me. If I was going to try to do something like that, I would be doing it by hand, because trying to get that to go through a sewing machine is not possible. And even with a small stitch, you wouldn't get enough stitches to hold it together. So I have made the executive decision that I am not going to be keeping these triangles. They're going into the bag of confetti. Okay? So this may be a shock to some of you who know me, but I do actually ultimately get rid of some of the fabric that I work with. Okay, so let's switch back. Okay, we're back here on camera 3. Oh, and my son is coming on tomorrow, and he is going to be replacing all of my webcams and my hard drive. So hopefully things will go a little bit better. Now, I would usually have a leader or ender here, but that works best for me with either white or black thread, which is of course not what I'm doing here. Hold on. So I've got my tails here. I'm just holding them down with my left hand. Okay. Now I just saw here, as I started to stitch, I started to pucker up. Anyway, I'm going to take my tweezers here, and I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to lift my needle. Oh, sorry, put the foot down. Lift the needle. And then I'm going to straighten this out a little bit, so I'm going to have less of a pucker going. Okay. Then I'm going to line myself back up so that my needle is going to be where it would have been before. And I'm all nice and smooth back there. And I have enough room here I can put my fingers on either side. Now I could use the tweezers instead. Okay, now I want to end with my needle down. These being 1 inch do give me that option. Alright, so now I'm going to grab another square here. So I want to chain piece these just because it's easier to do it that way. That's as simple as that. Now this piece is going to hold that thread in place. I should get less buckling like I had right there. It was actually the top piece that buckled, which can just happen sometimes. But I will not have a bird's nest on the bottom, which is another good reason for chain piecing or using leaders and enders. There we go. See, that worked just beautifully. Now the one problem with using your fingers to do this is that this screw keeps hitting the top of my finger. If that bothers you, then use the tweezers. Personally, it doesn't hit hard enough to bug me, so I don't have to worry about it. So another piece of fabric. And so the purple is for my roofs where the low is between 50 and 59. And you know we've had some of those, and we're going to have some more. I thought this fabric might be kind of fun because it looks a little bit like bricks. So when I put it in my house, because I have one house that's going to be like this, and of course there's this roof. The roof, I thought having them go across made a lot of sense as well, because that's kind of how roof tiles go. So if you have a directional fabric, you might want to give some thought as to which way you cut it for this sort of a thing. So this stripe on a roof going this way makes sense to me, but on the side of the house going this way because it'll look more like siding. So that's why I'm doing it this way. And I think, I'm not sure, I'd have to look. I think we did have one day where the high and the low were both in the 50 to 59 range, so I may have a purple house with this purple roof on it, which is also kind of cool. Alright, one more. And I'm always checking from the center to the lower point here to make sure that I'm putting these on the right way. It is very easy to get yourself turned around and then you have a backwards roof. Now, if it went this direction and I sewed on it, it really wouldn't matter on the first one. But on the second one, you don't want to have a parallelogram where both of these are going the same direction. You want one going one way and one going the other. So at the very least, you have to pay a lot of attention on the second one to make sure that you're orienting them properly. Or you won't wind up getting out your seam ripper and fixing the problem. This is not something that you can just ignore. I am a huge fan of ignoring things that don't need to be fixed when it comes to the quilting. If you accidentally put a fabric upside down or something like that, there's a lot of you who will tear it all out even if it's in the middle of the quilt. If it doesn't make a huge difference and a regular person looking at it wouldn't notice it, then I'm not going to worry about it. I am going to leave this last one here underneath my presser foot as a leader for the rest of them. Just to keep it nice and tight, but you certainly don't have to. Okay, now the second roof half, grass half, whatever you want to call it, is going to be going the opposite direction. So here we are. This is the one that I sewed, so this one has to go the opposite way from the center out to the outer corner down here. Okay? So I'm going to feed it through the opposite way. Starting in the middle is easier than starting at a free floating point. So that's why I'm starting in the middle of the roof and working my way towards the points. Alright, next one. Making sure I have my V shape from the center to the outer. Oh, I don't have the email address up. If you've got questions, you're welcome to email me at mail, M-A-I-L, at StashBlasterQuilts.com. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, whether it's about this or about organizing or anything else. There are some of you who talk to me in the chat, like Judy did. There are some of you who prefer to email. Anything like that's fine. If it relates to what I'm doing here, like about the organization or something like that, like I did today, I prefer to go ahead and talk about it here on the live stream so that other people who might have the same question but didn't want to ask can get the answer. It does mean that right now that I've talked about this organization plan a couple of times, probably too many times for those of you who watch every week, but there is going to come a time when that's going to stop. But here at the beginning in particular, it makes sense to me to make sure that I'm answering those questions. All right. Okay, here we go. Alright, now I am going to cut off the one that I started with because it only has the one side of the roof done. So I want to go ahead and finish that. And unfortunately, it means I have to take one more off my stack. I just cut these in 1-inch squares and then I added the strips later. I didn't worry about how many are in each one of these piles or anything. What I'm going to do is when it gets closer to the end, I'll pay attention to how many squares I need. But I know right now I have 366 houses. Even if I make the 2 of them a lot larger, that being the wedding day and the anniversary day, which is something I'm considering doing. Even if I do that, that would be 364 times 2 squares just for the roofs. I've got a ways to go before I have to worry on exactly how many I've cut. So I'm just going ahead and cutting a whole bunch of them, just like I'm cutting a whole bunch of the 3/4 inch strips for the sides of the house. And then as it gets closer to the end, then I'll just be cutting what I need to finish up the project. But right now, I need so many, it's not worth worrying about it. As they get sewn, then, you know, I'll know. And I'll just be having to keep track of like 50 or whatever, instead of 700 and something, which is what I would need of the squares for this quilt. If people think that they'd be interested, I could go ahead and pattern this quilt when it's all done and do the videos to show how I am accommodating the curves and that kind of stuff. But until then, the exact number of squares and things needed is not as important, I guess. If I do a pattern, those of you who have ever worked one of my patterns before will know I am very much conscious of fabric savings and things like that. I do overestimate slightly on the fabrics that you're going to need because everybody needs an oopsie factor, but hold on, let me transition. But I don't want to be wasting a lot of money on fabric either for this kind of thing. That's why this is a perfect scrap quilt, simply because I'm doing things with, I think it's a 9 by 1 inch strip of fabric does the entire house. So as long as I have that, I have enough to build a house. I don't have to go into my yardage. I don't have to go a lot of other places. And I don't even have to have it as a strip. A lot of the pieces I have, I've just been cutting chunks out of that are the 1 inch wide, and then I'm just making, or 3/4 of an inch wide for the grass on the side, for the side of the house that the grass is on. So even at that point, I'm not having to worry about it. So I can use a pretty small chunk of fabric and get an entire house out of it. I can calculate all the yardage if somebody wanted that. But again, with a temperature quilt, that's one of the problems that I had when I was thinking about it, actually. I was thinking, excuse me, I was sitting here thinking, okay, we've had years where it's been cold. You know, it's been in the 30s for multiple months. Now, I used to live in Buffalo, so that's not cold there. But here in Virginia, near DC where I am, that's cold. So I was sitting back and I was thinking, I was like, how much fabric of each of the 10 types do I need for a quilt where I don't know what the temperatures are going to be yet? So basically what I would have done is have to wait till the year was over and then purchase the fabric to try to make the quilt, or I would have guessed and severely, because I would over purchase rather than under purchase, just to be sure. Because trying to track down a fabric later can be real hard. So I was trying to figure out, okay, how much fabric should I get for which temperature ranges, etc., etc., etc. And then I was like, I don't have to do that. I can use my scrap collection and have a more interesting view, and all I need is the green background. So I had a piece of fabric, I think it's like 3 yards, 4 yards of green, maybe more, I'd have to double check, which is more than enough to do the top of the mattress for the queen size bed doubled. So I know I have more than enough fabric if I was just doing the green. So I didn't have to worry about it. Plenty of green, even for oopsie factor, and then little chips and chunks and little pieces to make my houses. So it makes it really easy, and I'm all for easy these days. Okay, so I'm going to spin this camera while you're not having to watch it. Here we go. All right. And I'm just going to press the houses, roofs that we just made. Oop. I've dropped a roof. Bet you can't say that very often without getting hurt. Okay, here we go. Let me transition back. Okay. All right. So these are all like this, just so you know. There's 3 green strips on each one, and so as the houses pieces are cut out, they're just laid on top of that green strip. So this house will be purple, and I want all purple on a card so that again, fewer thread changes. Okay, so let me right, this was obviously our first one. I'm going to just cut that tail off. I know a lot of people don't cut their long threads along the way. I just find it's a lot easier to do that. Now we have an advantage here that since the squares are on... No, I'm not hot anymore. Alright, let's give it just a minute. I do like this sunbeam because it does heat up nice and quick. Sorry, for those grammarians, it heats up very quickly. Okay. Yep. Alright. So I'm just going to press. I'm going to set it down on there. It's not at its ultimate temperature, so I'm going to leave it on a little bit longer than usual, but I just want to warm it up. Okay. And then I'm going to fold these away from the center part of the roof and give it a quick little press with my fingernails here. I'm going to go ahead and just do them all. Nice thing is that by pressing both stacks, by the time I got to the second one and I was done pressing it, the first ones had a chance to cool down enough to be manipulable. Okay. Alright, I'm going to move these out to the side a little bit so I have a little bit better grip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this back and I'm going to hold it with this finger here in the corner, and then I'm going to press. And while that's sitting there, I'm going to line up the next one. I'm not scrubbing this back and forth. I'm going to lift and I'm going to press. Now if I was doing this downstairs where I do most of my pressing, I would leave it in position until it completely cooled. So I'm going to do that a little bit here by moving the next one over, but I may have to move them before I get completely there. So I'm going to do the same thing, finger down, press. I am right-handed, so I know that blocks a little bit of the view. Finger down, press. Now I'm not going to cut, hold on, let me rotate this a little bit more. I'm not going to cut these dog ears off until I'm ready to sew it onto the main block, just so it continues to have more stability while it's on the cards and moving around. Okay, I will, just before it's attached to the house, I will trim those off so that everything is all nice and clean and square and ready. But the less stress you can put on it in the process, the better off you are. Okay, so that's our first three. Oh, that one's cool. This one is not, obviously. So we have 5 minutes left. If you've enjoyed today, please feel free to like, subscribe. If you hit the bell, it'll let you know when I'm on. I usually start the live stream 15 minutes before I'm going to start talking, so that you can come and join me. But you can, you know, swing through the ladies' room first, or whatever it is you might want to do, and then grab a cup of tea or whatever and be ready to join us here. So I hope you've had a good time. I do try to respect your time by ending on time. We have 2 minutes to go. So first and third Wednesday of every month, I do my best to be here. If I'm speaking at a convention, and I always give you plenty of warning, I may or may not be able to do the live stream from there. That's happened a couple of times when I've just not been able to. But I do try very, very hard. Even if I don't have any stuff pre-done to show you, like today, I do want to make sure that I'm here for you. So please feel free to join me at any time. Sign in the chat. Email me at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com. I'd be happy to answer questions. If you have any suggestions for how I can make this better, I'd love to hear them. I know it's a long form content, and a lot of people like the short little pieces. When I am no longer working in the field as an organizer, it is my goal to make this my full-time job. But right now, I can't do that. So the editing time it takes to edit actual video clips is something I don't have. I'd rather spend the time here with you guys chatting and actually doing the sewing than spending hours and hours and hours editing. One thing I didn't know but when I started this was it can take 7 hours to edit 1 minute of content. And especially if you start getting sponsors, and so you have to do sponsor videos and all that too, it's a lot. And so until I have that ability to do shorter form content and have the editing time, this is how it's going to be. This is how we're going to do this. But I hope you've had a good time. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in 3 weeks. That's when it'll be the first Wednesday of May. All right? Take care. Have a happy Mother's Day. Have a happy Easter this weekend. All of that. I am wishing all of you my very best. Have a great time. Bye-bye.